Mr. Keith.Olsen. Once again, thank you. Keith.Olsen, the president of the Yonkers PBA. We're sitting here today for an interesting conversation about journalism, First Amendment responsibilities, and differences between regular news media and bloggers, people like I.
Yes.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Keith, Sergeant Keith.
Detective.
Detective Keith, I keep mistaking.
Trying to
Detective.
promote me. I
That's
appreciate
it.
that.
We don't pay. Then we have a
The
problem.
deal is off.
Deal is off.
Yes.
There is something going on. There is litigations going on
Yes.
against Hezi Aris.
Correct.
First, how do you consider Mr. Harris? A journalist? A blogger? How do you see him?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would consider him more of a blogger. I would like to consider him a journalist, except he doesn't really adhere to the journalistic ethics and standards, so I would not call him a journalist.
So according to you, what is this ethics that you're referring to? What do you actually talk? What do you mean by it?
That you have to write the truth, and it's not just according to me. If you Google journalistic ethics and standards, there's a list of responsibilities and things that journalists should follow that Mr. Aris doesn't follow. You have to, when you're writing something, you have the responsibility to write the truth. You have to know it's true, and you have to work towards knowing it's true. You have to check your sources. You have to corroborate information. And Mr. Aris, especially in my case, has not done any of that for several years.
So we have here a 32-page lawsuit.
Yes.
32-page. The allegations on this lawsuit, it's things that have been going on for the last 5 years.
Correct.
Tell us how those allegations have impacted you professionally, socially. How has that been? How did that impact you?
It's been quite a burden. It's been 5 years worth of defamatory comments. All libel, all just misinformation, lies by Mr. Aris and I guess by some of his sources. And it's affected me tremendously. It's made my job harder as a PBA president. There were a lot of things that I had to, rumors that I had to shoot down, information that was out there that I had to combat against, to show people that, in fact, it wasn't the truth. Personally, it's weighed on me quite a bit. It's, again, 5 years worth of just really nasty comments, especially in the comments section, of the Yonkers Tribune website. They have an anonymous commenting section, and some of the nastiest things have been said in there. My family sees it. My wife, my mother. There's been nasty comments towards my family, towards my mother and my sister. It's not been fun.
Now, you as a police officer, you deal with the First Amendment all the time. I have the right to speak. Mr. Harris doesn't have that right to speak?
No, he absolutely has a First Amendment right, like we all do as citizens of the United States. And the truth is, for 30 years as a police officer, I fought for people's rights. I fought for their right, their First Amendment rights and others. But you do not have the right to write misinformation and to lie about people and to defame them. It's just not part of the First Amendment. Mr. Aris does not have the right to print false information, lies, with accusations of crimes and misdeeds. He just doesn't have that right.
Now, what if those statements that he makes, or that are made in his publications, what if he believes that they are true? So it's not maliciously printed to defame you or slander you. What if he believes that those statements are correct?
Well, he still has an obligation to write the truth, and he can't recklessly lie. You have to do something to corroborate your information. And just for instance, he has this one thing that he constantly writes about how myself and the Yonkers PBA pay Nick Spano and his lobbying firm $48,000 a year, and we pay that money to accomplish certain things within Yonkers politics. It's completely untrue. And the most basic part of it is the money part of it. Now, I've called Mr. Aris's radio show to correct him and say we don't pay $48,000 a year. It's actually half of that. This is information that's available online. He's completely inflating this number, to prove his point, which isn't true. He's lying. I've pointed out how that's not true, and I've pointed out how he can prove it's not true. Don't take my word for it. You can go online and get this information correct, straight from the state. But he refuses to, and he continually still to this day prints that information.
So you think he does that intentionally?
Without a doubt.
Not that somebody's feeding him wrong information and he's going under the pretense that he believes that information. Is it intentionally, and why?
It's intentional and it's malicious. As to the why, I'm not sure. One day in court maybe we'll find that out. But when you print information, you have some obligation to try and find out if it's true. And if you're not doing that, you're being reckless. Another, for instance, and there's many of them, and you see in the lawsuit, there's many accusations.
Yes, I have.
And this is only 1 year's worth, just so we're
No,
clear,
actually,
too.
this one talks about 5 years worth.
Well, we talk about 5 years, but the actual complaints listed are only from the last year.
That's the statute of limitations.
The statute of limitations.
That was going to be my other question.
Okay, so we'll get into that later. But one
Yes.
of the accusations is that he claims that when I moved from my house to another place, that I utilized the city of Yonkers DPW to do my move. In other words, I got a free move. I misused city, government property for my own means and for my own gains. He's accusing me of a crime, but he has nothing to corroborate that. Now, think about how easily this is corroborated. I'm sure there would be pictures of that. You would know who moved me, what truck or a DPW truck, which DPW people. None of that. He doesn't print any of that because it doesn't exist. And on the other hand, he knows how to get in touch with me. If he had just called and said, "Hey, I'm hearing this is what happened. Can you tell me if this is true or not?" I would have provided him the moving company that I used, a receipt of my move. That's reckless. That's printing something just for his own.
You are taking the questions out of my mouth. I was going to ask exactly that. All right, that is accusations. Maybe you got the wrong information. Did he ever contacted you and ask you, what about this?
Well, and that's the thing too. Not only has he not contacted me, but in the past, prior to this Blue Truth series, which was created about 5 years ago, he used to call me, and I would answer his questions. I had been on his radio show a number of times. I had provided him with several stories for the Yonkers Tribune. We had a relationship, so he knows to this day how to get in touch with me. And then throughout the years, in the last year or so, I had called his radio show and practically begged him, said, "Listen, call me. I'm asking you to call me to corroborate this information." And he said, and at one point on his radio show, he goes, "You know what? I'll do that." And he has never done that. He has never once.
Continued.
He continues to write reckless and malicious information about me, but has never once tried to confirm any of it.
So do you consider yourself a victim?
In this case, yes, I do.
And you're not the only one, from my understanding. There is 2 lawsuits. We're not going to touch the other person,
Sure.
because the person is not here, but there is 2 concurrent lawsuits. But they basically the same attorney, same lawsuits,
Yes.
maybe 1 or 2 things different, but basically the same.
Correct. 2 of my coworkers.
Now tell me, what's going on with these fees, that it's cash only, with the fights of, how much did you make?
Me personally,
Yes.
not a penny. It's probably cost me thousands of dollars, all of these things. So one of the things he refers to is the I believe is the money made from the Yonkers Police and Fire Tough Man
Correct.
competition. In the past, in the first few Tough Man competitions, Hezi used to sit ringside. He would print stories about them, and one of the things he would print was how we sold tickets in advance so that we didn't have to have cash on hand. So he knows personally. He wrote stories about how how we weren't even touching the cash. He knows that. So and again, this comes back to the recklessness of what he says, where he paints this picture that we're taking in these tons of cash and somehow stuffing it in our pockets and walking away with it. The fact is that myself and John Muller and Brian Moran, who run the Tough Man, never even touch a penny of it. He knows that is at least somewhat true because he's written stories about how the Tough Man, how we operate. And he's covered events too where we've donated the money. He knew that there was an instance where in the last Tough Man we had donated and given out 2 checks, and they were actual checks, and the checks were this big, so you couldn't really miss them. And one was to the Westchester School for Special Children, which he claims we gave Lenny Spano, who runs the school, $30,000 in cash, when there's actual photos, and there was a press conference covering it, showing us handing them a check for $30,000. And we also gave $30,000 to the Make-A-Wish Foundation in that same press conference, both from the same night.
Detective, I am also on this business, blogging, journalism, reporting, whatever you want to call it. And once in a while, I get calls, offer me information about this or information about that. And one of the questions that I ask myself before I release the article is, why are they calling me
Right.
and giving me this information? I don't pull this information out of my wallet and put it out there.
Of course.
There is somebody calling Hezi. Do you have any idea who this person might be and why this person is doing this?
I think there's a number of people. It's not just one. I've talked to Hezi in the past about who some of his sources are. He, on his radio show, has confirmed who at least one of his sources were. It's a former member of our police department. I won't even mention his name. He's retired now, and we've moved on. But you're right. I mean, people out there have an agenda, and that's why it's so important for you guys in your role. You have a very high level of responsibility, and you do it right. You question your sources. It's the same as us as detectives. People give us information all the time. But we also realize people out there have an agenda, and they may want to get somebody arrested for their own personal gains and their own personal reasons. So, it's super important for us to vet the information that we get. Mr. Aris doesn't do any of that. He wants to believe it, and then he just writes a story about it. And you can't do that. That is not what the First Amendment is. This is in no way, shape, or form an attack on the First Amendment. This is about just writing defamatory nonsense, and it's gone on for years.
Do you think there is a misunderstanding, not just from bloggers, but from people in general, who don't understand what the First Amendment is? Some people think that First Amendment is, I have the right to say whatever I want.
Sure.
Regardless if it's the truth, regardless if I know it's a lie and I'm only saying that to hurt you. Can you explain to the camera and to the people who are watching this, what is the First Amendment, legal terms?
You have the right to free speech, but that does not cover everything. For instance, and we use this example all the time, you have the right to free speech and we can say whatever we want. However, you can't walk into a crowded movie theater and start screaming there's a fire. That's against the law. That's reckless. You can't do that. That's not covered. And in this case, the First Amendment does not cover defamatory writings or libel. You do not. The First Amendment does not cover a so-called journalist writing fake stories to hurt somebody's reputation. There's rules against that. And I think in this day and age now, we're changing into this whole world of social media and this new platform where people are jumping in and becoming news sources, people like yourself. And some take it seriously and some are professional like you, and then some others are not, like Mr. Aris. And I think as a society we're kind of learning how to deal with these things. And that's what this lawsuit is about. This isn't just about my case. I know that for my case, in pretty much in every municipality, in every town and village, there's somebody else probably going through the same thing I am. And I hope that this case kind of helps bring closure to a lot of that stuff.
Now, normally a case like this, you're suing for something. Is that a dollar amount associated with this?
There is. It's funny because I didn't know what the dollar amount was until another journalist had asked me that recently. And that's because this is not about the money. It really is not. I think that part of it is legitimate, and Lord knows that I've suffered an awful lot, and I think some compensatory damages would be deserving, but that's not really what this is about. This is about righting a wrong.
Detective, but it could be, because let's say today you decide to retire.
Things where I won't even know. If I apply for a job and don't get a call back, it may be because this garbage is out.
And the problem is with the society that we live in, with the beast that we created. Social platforms, Google, search engines.
Sure.
Everything is searchable.
That's right.
And sometimes this might impact us, and as you said, you might not even know.
That's correct.
You might be rejected from a job because of this, and you will never know. They just don't call you back.
That's right.
Now, if you had Mr. Hezi right across from you, what would you tell him?
There's so much to be said. I've called this radio show and I've spoken my mind.
But in relationship to this lawsuit,
I would say he should be ashamed of himself. He had a responsibility here, and he was growing something that could have been important to Yonkers and helpful to Yonkers, like an alternative news site that people can turn to for proper and real information, and he abused that for a personal reason. I don't know if I'll ever know what that personal reason was, but I do know that he was completely irresponsible and reckless in doing that, and he's damaged my reputation as a result.
Is it possible that he was used?
There's no doubt about that, and I tried to point that out to him as well. We do know some of the people that were providing him information. I'm sure there's people that I have no idea that are providing him information. But yeah, and people in these, in these positions like yourself, like you got it. You realize that there are going to be people out there who are going to try and use you for their own personal reasons. And yeah, there's no doubt that he was used.
Was left holding the bag?
We're going to see. This isn't. This may not just end with him. We're looking forward to getting towards discovery and seeing where it leads to next.
There is more bloggers. Am I on the list?
No. Well, unless you've been saying nasty things
No,
about me online, I don't think that's
you
the
would
case.
know. You would know.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I mean, some of the comments are just absolutely horrific. And maybe one day we'll get to the bottom of that and see who's been saying some of these things. There are people that have been on there that have threatened my life, threatened to kill me, threatened to cut my throat open. These are things that my family has had to read about for the last several years.
And you take those things serious?
How could I not? I'd be a fool not to. In this day and age, to ignore those things, that would be silly.
Explain to to our audience how important it is, detective, to be responsible and understand the impact of what you write, because words do matter.
It may be the most important thing we have out there. The media, I think, has played this huge role in our society that is really supposed to balance things. It balances politics, it balances the government, and it's something that the public, should be able to rely on for correct, truthful information. And it is a huge responsibility. And when you abuse that responsibility, I think there's really no place for that in our society.
Now, I understand you're holding Hezi responsible for the things he writes, for the articles that he puts out.
Yes.
Perhaps he should check. I can understand this. But do you hold him responsible for the comments that are made in his social page?
Yes, absolutely.
Why?
Because he, as the host of that site, is responsible for some of the comments on there. And generally speaking, the law says that the host is not responsible, that you're allowed to have an anonymous commenting section, and that the host isn't responsible for those comments unless you start to control them and edit them. And you start to take some comments out, add some comments in, leave certain comments in, delete other comments, and he does that actively. For his friends, he'll remove comments. He'll edit. You'll see edited by Hezi.
What do you mean? I make a comment, and he edits my own comment?
Yeah, we've seen that, and there'll be examples, that'll come out in court where, it says he actively says online, this comment has been omitted by Hezi, and he'll have it blacked out. This comment has been edited because of graphic content, and he puts his name to it. Yet they've never edited anything with my name on it. And some of the nastiest things, and I have some really horrible examples too of, just homophobic, racist, sexually graphic comments that have been made about me and my friends that he just leaves up there.
So what do you mean? So I'm asking this so people can understand. The comments that he has not edited are the comments that are slandering you.
Correct.
So those comments he leaves the full content.
That's right. It's in other words, he claims to have some kind of a standard of ethics in the commenting section, and at times enforces those rules, except when it comes to Keith Olsen and John Muller and Brian Moran, or any of his other enemies.
Gotcha.
Depending on what what your name is, he'll leave comments up or edit them.
Now, I believe I heard that. I don't know if it was on your lawsuit or Chief Mueller, that prior, when he first started his blog or his social page, he didn't control the content, meaning the comments. Later on, then he began to control the comments, delete things that went against his code of conduct.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So he has a method. So why do you think it changed before it was free, open to all, and then it changed in order to keep control of the conversation?
You know, I don't know, and that's a question that we'll be asking in court.
And when is the next court day?
Well, he just got served with our lawsuit on March 14th, on my lawsuit. So I think he has 20 days to answer it. So we're just at the beginning stages. I'm not even sure who his attorney is that's representing him. I know that City Council President Michael Cater is representing him in the Mueller suit. I don't know if that's the case in my suit yet, but we should be finding out pretty soon. And that's a whole other interesting topic that...
Cater, the council president,
Yes.
it's his attorney on record
Correct.
against on this lawsuit.
That's correct.
Isn't that a conflict of interest?
I think it's a huge conflict of interest. It's a huge conflict of interest that he's representing a local blog site, one that depending on who they favor and who they don't, they write good stories and bad about. That he obviously is a city council president. I think there's a ton of conflicts there.
You think there is a guarantee that maybe will not write any bad stories towards the council president based on the defense?
Have you seen any?
I actually don't follow, but
Okay, I have not.
You have not.
Yes.
So, Detective, is there anything else that you want to bring up? Any awareness that you want to talk about it?
You know, I would encourage people to read the lawsuit. You know, there's links. Maybe you could post a link to it online. I know that Brian Harrod in the Yonkers Newswire had posted a link to it, and I think I actually put a copy of it up there.
We will, but I will omit your home address and
Please.
and the chief is so
Yeah.
we don't want to disclose that information.
Please, that would be great. But we encourage people to read it, and it explains, really what the First Amendment is and what it isn't. What you're not allowed to do, which is why we've filed a lawsuit. And we hope that, one of the end results of this is that we raise the bar for journalistic standards in Yonkers. I think you're doing a great job, Ben. And I'm sure you learn new things every day, right?
Sure.
It's an incredible venture to start out on. But Yonkers deserves better than the Yonkers Tribune and Hezi Aris.
Well, I think the social platforms, Detective, in Yonkers and all over the country, it's becoming a very powerful tool, because that's where most people, especially in cities like ours,
Yes.
that's where they go to get what's going on immediately.
That's true.
Okay, as it happens. And with that said, there is room for error, because I see that very often I go to certain scenes and things are not even very clear for the police department, so
That's
there
right.
is a room for error.
Without a doubt.
But making a malicious error is different than
Right.
not having all the details at that particular moment.
Yeah, that's a great point. Doing it on purpose, maliciously, there's no room, there's no place for that in our society, and that's what's been happening to me and some other people in Yonkers, and we hope to put an end to it.
And how has that affected your membership? The morale?
Yeah, my membership is in pretty good standing, but it's making it harder. It's made it harder for me, because a lot of this information out there I've had to combat and explain that no, this is not the case. One of the things Mr. Aris always talks about is how we gave away medical benefits for our members in 207C, which is a New York State. 207C is a law. And it's not true. And I've gone on his radio show and challenged him and said, all right, well, let's talk about this. And he knows that it's not true, but he continually talks about it. And does some of that seep through to the membership? I would say probably so. And then it takes more effort for me to explain to them, sometimes personally or sometimes in a larger group, hey, here's the real truth. We didn't give any of that away. This is what actually happened. So it's made my job harder.
So, Detective, so people know, what is this term that uses the blue wall? Is that how he calls it?
The blue truth?
The blue truth. Is that a page or a platform within a page where people go to talk about law enforcement and vent their frustration?
No, it's a term that Mr. Aris created to talk about me and a small group of my friends. If you notice, he doesn't criticize anybody else. No matter what goes wrong in the police department, somehow it is Detective Keith Olsen's fault. There are many ranks higher than me. There are sergeants and lieutenants and captains and chiefs and then a commissioner. But for some reason, everything that goes wrong in this police department is my fault and my fault only. He doesn't criticize the commissioner at all. He doesn't criticize most of the chiefs, just the one. He clearly has an agenda. And to call it the blue truth is the biggest irony, because there is very little truth in anything that he's ever written.
Well, guys, you heard it from Detective Keith Olsen about what's going on, the merits of the lawsuit. Now, let's see what happens. But if you're going to blog, if you're going to talk about this, you need to be responsible about what you put out, because words do matter, and people's lives do matter as well, and the families, those that would surround those people as well.
Yes.
So stay tuned for more, and Yonkers Voice always on the case and bringing you the information that we feel it's important to you. Stay tuned for more.